and an even better way to start the show, or the second hour, as I was saying, is to chat with a very interesting man from Dunedin. His name is Heath Te Au, and he is a drug and alcohol counsellor working through the Southern DHB there, and we're continuing our discussion about alcohol issues in this country, following on from Paddy Gower's two-night series on the situation on booze and the damage it's doing. So, privileged to have Heath on the line right now. Kia ora, Heath, how are you doing?
G'day, Leanne. I'm doing well. How are you going?
Oh, fantastic. Yeah, real good to talk to you, and thanks for your time, because you probably got a bit on, I imagine.
Yeah, well, I'm not actually with the DHB anymore. I heard you introduce that, but I've had many years working there.
Okay, well, that's cool. And you're still very active in this field, aren't you?
Absolutely, yeah. No, I'm still a registered AOD clinician, yeah.
Yeah, so tell us a little bit about your journey, because I guess... you've been on both sides of the fence, and things turned a bit pear-shaped when you were playing music. You were heavily involved in the music scene. You're a great musician. You played with a lot of great bands and things, but things went a bit wrong for you for a while. How tough was it, sort of climbing back up again?
Falling down that spiral, I didn't even realise it was happening, but once I was down there and trying to find my way back out, it was pretty difficult for sure. After watching that show with Paddy and seeing the struggles he's having and stuff, I could relate to a lot of it for sure. I think that the guilt and shame of sort of looking at what you've done and all that kind of stuff, the impacts on others and all that kind of stuff is pretty hard.
Yeah.
Got to tip my hat to the guy for being willing to look at it all. Because the nature of addiction is to not want to look at that stuff, is to keep my head in the clouds and keep doing what I'm doing and pretending it's not happening, where really the actually pulling yourself out really is just having a good look at yourself and looking at what is this what you want, It was a sobering experience watching it. Excuse the pun.
It's a great pun, but I think a few people would have perhaps seen some warning signs watching that show. I think it's probably something we don't talk about enough in this country. Do you think?
Oh, absolutely. I look at an example, I guess, would be the court news, where you might see a big article about someone's behaviour on methamphetamine, which is a concern. But there'll be 20 or 30 drink drives which are pushed into the corner and minimised. And alcohol by far is the most dangerous drug we have out there because of the availability, the way it's pushed in advertising media, that kind of stuff, the influence it has on younger people. The Steinlager All Blacks, the Speight's Highlanders, that has a lot of weight, Well, alcohol is seen as okay,
Yeah, oh, totally. And also not just okay, but it's really cool to drink, isn't it?
Yeah, well, you're right. It's I can remember being younger and alcohol being pushed with my peers. It was part of being a man, was how much you could drink and all that kind of stuff. And the behaviours that happen when someone is influenced by alcohol, now how that is normalised and celebrated. It's quite shocking, really.
The yard glass thing is pretty nutty, isn't it? 21, and you have to do the yard glass, or you don't fit in. Crazy stuff. That's right.
It's part of. It's been a part of a culture. It's been accepted. It's almost like a tribal process in a way, and it's celebrated. It's definitely celebrated. It was good to see some of I think the most powerful thing I saw on that was in that program was that the group of flatmates in that Wellington flat who were obviously shocked with Paddy's behaviour, and it was good to see young people actually being kind of questioning what was going on. But the binge drinking culture in New Zealand. A lot of people will have that, at the end of the week, go and have a few drinks at the bar or happy hour, that kind of thing, and not even seeing that that's part of that binge drinking culture of celebrating by having a few drinks. And where does that lead to? It's normalised here. It's not like that in every other country. It's definitely like that here.
Right, and so you really think that other countries are way less focused on the booze culture?
Well, I think Paddy made a very valid point in that program about the 6 o'clock swill and where that came from and how that culture is still there and celebrated, to drink as much as you can in a short period of time. Sure, other countries have problems and stuff with it as well, but New Zealand definitely has a problem. I know I used to drink a lot and was involved in that kind of scene, but I do everything I can to avoid being around the Octagon in the weekend at night. For me, it's a dangerous place.
Yeah.
Very reactive stuff can happen.
Yes. Dunedin, unfortunately, has that culture about it, and it's been like that for a long time. And I know people whose children have gone to university there, and I don't want to sound like a wowser, but they've come back pretty much alcoholics. You know, like they've gone there and they've learnt how to drink and they've learned how to hold their booze, you know, and then they realise they've actually got a problem and they've got no money. They probably haven't got a degree either because they've been having a great time. And it is a fantastic city to go out and I love the students there and I love the feel of it. But surely it's time to kind of turn that around a bit, because I'm just thinking of all the damage that's been done at a young age for these guys.
Oh, absolutely. I think there's a lot of people here have tried to change that culture within, but it's quite difficult to do, isn't it, when it's so heavily celebrated and there's a massive influence there.
The keg parties.
I definitely, I think the availability of alcohol and stuff here, like I look at what Invercargill did by not having beer in the supermarkets and stuff like that. There's some things we could do. I think the lowering of the age of alcohol to 18 and increasing its availability. You look at the socioeconomic areas, like in South Dunedin, there'll be so many more bottle stores, there's so many more gambling halls and all that kind of stuff, and they're not in the wealthy areas, and that it's intentional, that kind of stuff. It's not helpful, you know. People will drink or drug when things aren't going well as a way to try and fix the problem. And of course it just reinforces the problem, because we've got quite a big sort of socioeconomic divide in New Zealand at the moment. It's pretty hard to live, you know, the cost of living, rent, all that kind of thing. So we're providing a lot of reasons for people to drink and get away from their problems. Same with the mental health stuff, you know, it's linked. We're kind of going about it the wrong way, you know.
I think the supermarket thing's a big one, because, you know, I never thought about that much until last night when they were having the group discussion about it and saying, should we sell booze in supermarkets? And I thought, oh yeah, maybe that is a really good idea. Just those two things, you know, not having it available there right in front of you when you're buying your butter and milk or whatever. And number two, putting the age back up to 20. Those could be two really beneficial things, couldn't they?
Well, that's right. I mean, you know, you've got a couple of generations now of people where buying alcohol, having beer and wine in the supermarket trolley while they're growing up is normal. It's part of the groceries. So that's part of the culture in itself, yeah? It's pretty hard for some kid on the checkout to regulate the sale of that alcohol. It's not going to happen, you know? We could definitely do things differently. I mean, I look at the availability of alcohol and how it isn't really monitored. It's dangerous, you know. It's essentially drug dealing, right? The central nervous system depressant. It can kill you if you have too much. It can shut down your respiratory system. It's a really dangerous drug. Looking at that stuff that was being talked about in that documentary about it being more dangerous than heroin, the evidence of that would support that. You know, when I was studying, I did a research project on overdoses of different drugs and looking at the drug laws basically, and what made, you know, why there were classifications of Drugs Act, Misuse of Drugs Act, 1977, all that kind of stuff, and they were seeing that the categories for the Misuse of Drugs Act were based on the I guess the danger or the risks involved with the drug to self or to others. And the overdoses from opiates from 2002 to 2012 was something like 200 or 300, and it was 1,100 with alcohol. And looking at all these reasons why the laws are in place, I was going, why on earth is this drug the one that's legal? It's not saying the other ones aren't bad, but the alcohol is a really dangerous drug. You can get physically dependent to it quite quickly, and it's available and it's cheap, so you can go and get more. It's a problem, yeah.
Yeah. So was it more alcohol for you that was the issue, or drugs, or a bit of combo of both?
A combo of both. When I left the opioid sort of scene, which is what I got into in the music scene, all that kind of stuff. Alcohol was still being used a lot, but alcohol came in its place. And cross addiction can happen. It's not just with drugs.
Okay.
It can be gambling or all kinds of things. But if someone thinks they're fixing the problem just by stopping, but the issue is still there, it's inevitable the problem's going to come forward.
My question to
Patrick,
sorry, Heath. Yeah,
Yep.
I was going to say,
I was just going to say,
yes.
Yep, sorry.
I'm sorry. I was just going to say with Paddy, like he seemed to be able to stop so quickly, and I found that kind of weird because I thought if he truly was an alcoholic, which he said he was, but I don't know whether we really ever found out whether he had a binge drinking problem or was he an alcoholic. But he stops dead. And yet I interviewed my cousin yesterday, who is an alcoholic who's been sober for 33 years, and he said everyone that he met in AA took a very long time and went through hell trying to stop, and it wasn't as easy as just going on TV and saying, guess what, I quit, and look at me, I'm 6 months sober. How do we know, is that sending out a bad message in a way? Is that that the TV veneer is not really telling the true story? What about the craving? Surely there's times when you're going to go, I need to drink, if it's been that big a part of your life.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, the criteria for any substance use disorder will have the physiological stuff, the physical withdrawal, that kind of stuff, the psychological stuff, like the cravings and the stress and that kind of stuff. But there's other factors as well as like constantly doing something despite it causing negative consequences, impact on job and impact on family, and there's a lot of factors. And I think for that instance with Paddy, I've seen that with people before where they can go through years of trying to stop and they relapse and that kind of thing. But when the penny dropping moment happens, when someone goes, hang on, what's going on here, and actually asks themselves that, that can be a motivating factor.
Right.
When someone sees something for what it is. I mean, he did share that his fear of getting a particular illness and then finding out that alcohol was one of the bigger causes of it. And I think that friend of his letting him know, hey man, we knew something bad was going to happen. We're just waiting for it, but we didn't know how to talk to you. That had a big impact on him. And I think that's that penny dropping moment, And I'm sure they didn't tell us the nitty gritty. I'm sure he would have had some rough times. It's never all good. There are rough times.
Yeah, I'll bet.
Yeah. And I guess when someone is entering some form of recovery or wellness from addiction, it's helpful to not look at the length of time as such, or are you going to make it and all that kind of stuff. It's sort of seen as one day at a time. Otherwise, it can work against someone.
It would have to be, wouldn't it? It would have to be.
Yeah. Yeah.
Because you just have to get to the end of
what it's about.
Yeah, get to the end of the day and go, okay, I got through that. I can do it again tomorrow. Small steps.
Yeah.
Let's see if we can do a week.
Yep. Yeah. Absolutely. I think one of the most unhelpful things I did for myself was in the early days saying I'll never take drugs again, and then that would stress me out and lead to a relapse.
Yeah, right.
And then actually going to recovery meetings and actually saying it's just taking this one day at a time, and if I have to, 1 hour at a time was the way through.
Because
small steps.
That's right. It's like with any problem. I guess anxiety is a similar thing. Anything like that. If you're thinking too far ahead, that's when you're overwhelmed.
Well, it starts becoming that stuff that you can't control because you don't know what's going to happen tomorrow, and there's nothing we can do about what happened yesterday. So sitting in the here and now is where the solution is.
Yeah,
sure.
And that's what you tell people who come to see you. Like, I guess you must see some, you must hear some really hard stories. It must be. Do you find your job quite soul destroying at times, or is it uplifting as well?
Both. I think sometimes you can hear some difficult stuff for sure, but that's what good supervision is about. So you can process things that you might hear that can be distressing, but having that unconditional regard for someone, exploring their story and letting them find their own way out. Me telling someone what to do is never going to be helpful. It's not going to work. But someone finding their own way out or coming to terms with why they're using, that's part of their solution, for sure. Yeah.
And so do you think that, from where you're sitting currently, do you think that New Zealand has a very big issue with alcohol abuse? Like, is it one of the key problems in our society today?
Yes, it's reflective of many things in our culture, but yeah, it would be naive for anyone to suggest that alcohol is not an issue in this country, for sure.
Okay, so it's obviously. I think it's really healthy what's happening this week, and I guess the problem is now that there's a bit. It's a hot topic, but then it'll just fade. It's a bit like an old newspaper, and people will forget. And some people might take something out of it, or perhaps contact someone if they need help. But the problem is keeping this in the public eye, keeping people aware.
Oh, absolutely, and the alcohol company's been held to account for the things they do, like the sugary RTD drinks, which are definitely aimed at kids that are 18 or younger. If they're stopping drinking Coca-Cola and they're making their way into alcohol, kind of thing, that is intentional. That's drug pushing, really, is what that is.
Yeah.
And it should be seen that way. Alcohol is a drug. It's a CNS depressant. It's in the same family as benzos and opioids. It's the opioid receptor that it's affecting. It should be seen in that way. The alcohol industry should be held to account that what they're doing is ethical.
It was interesting.
Sure. And there's no accountability, because the alcohol industry has a lot of lobbying power with the government and that kind of stuff. And, when you see things like there's a minister for racing and for sports and stuff, and the alcohol industry's influence, and like I say, like with the alcohol sponsorship of all the rugby teams and stuff, there's a lot of influence there. It's pretty hard to be the voice against it when you've got so many things pushing in the other direction, saying that it's okay.
Mm-hmm. It was interesting to see Greg Ross from the vodka company on last night on the panel. You might not have seen that, but it was the follow-up to Paddy's show, and they were just discussing, how to get around things. And then, he crossed to some vineyards in Central Otago, which is where we are broadcasting from. And, obviously there, there is a time and a place for I suppose for, a winery to be creating a beautiful wine, and that's kind of like an art. And I think if that's a whole different thing to binge drinking. So we don't want to completely crush some of the good things that this sort of thing can bring in terms of civilized culture. But unfortunately, we sort of like you say, it's all about the RTDs and the heavy drinking, isn't it? Particularly on the weekends, and the crime that results.
It's also, it's really easy to do a foolish thing after you've had a few drinks, right? I mean, alcohol depletes your ability to process thiamine, which is how you lay down memory, which is why you don't remember anything when you've had a hard night. So, that's why people like drinking when they're stressed out, to get rid of, to make the problems go away. But what you're saying about the wine, I think there's a strict difference, or there's a big difference between, say, a nice bottle of Pinot Gris and those 3-litre casks that are stacked up at the supermarket. There's a big difference.
Yeah. Okay, interesting.
A 3-litre cask isn't about taste. It's about getting drunk.
It's just about what it can do to you quickly.
Yeah.
How did you feel when you saw the young man who is I think he's a TikTok star, and he's got all those contraptions for drinking several beers at once and things like that?
Yeah, well, that's part of the celebration, isn't it? That bravery and all that kind of stuff that goes with it. It's pretty unhealthy.
Who makes these? I don't want to sound like an old fuddy-duddy, but who the hell makes these devices that you can hook up all these? I didn't even know they were available. And he pulls out all this stuff, and he's got all these hits on his site, and people love it, and they're like, "Yeah, mate," and it's just so tragic, isn't it?
Well, it is. Education's always the answer, right? So people can make an informed choice about what they're going to do and why they're going to do it. That's what I would promote. That sort of celebrating of that kind of stuff and that kind of behaviour it's never going to be positive, I mean, there's a whole generation of young people that think that that's what you do when you go out. There's a whole bunch of people that are much older now that still have that belief, and they've had it since they were young, that when they go to the pub, they get as out of it as they possibly can. It's
And yet,
education is the answer.
Interesting what you said about, so you're saying a lot of people, and, look, we've all been guilty of this. If you're having a really low day and you're like, damn, I need a wine, I don't know. It's just what people say. Like if I visit mum in the rest home and it's been upsetting because she's blind or whatever, and I'm going, and they're like, go home and get yourself a nice glass of wine. And you're like, yeah, I will. And then you're like, I don't feel any better. What's happened? I'm lucky enough because I got an off button, but I still feel like in the past, not nowadays, but I still feel like in the past that I definitely have used alcohol as a crutch. And but my cousin who I interviewed yesterday, who, as I say, is an alcoholic, who was very brave and really honest, and he said to me, look, I used to use alcohol when I was feeling fantastic. He said, it was such an addiction for me. He said, I would use it because I would want the good vibes to continue. He said, I was trying to hang on to a feeling, and he said, I thought that was the way. He said, it wasn't just in the bad times when I was really low. He said, more often than not, it was when I was really high and really happy. And I was like, right, I'm going to make this buzz last forever because it just feels so good, So it can be used in many different ways.
Oh, absolutely. I think any drug, someone's taken it to try and feel better, whether it be that they're feeling down, they want to feel better, or they're feeling quite good and they're trying to make that stronger. But that's why people will take a drug, is to feel better, to relax, or, the intention is to feel better, right?
Yeah. Yeah, it is.
It's just when it becomes normal, and it's not making you feel different, it's just normal.
And it's often to cover up pain, isn't it? And stuff that's going on.
Well, often, for sure. And when you see someone in withdrawal, the pain becomes evident, right?
Yeah.
Not only the pain from withdrawal, but actually all the stuff that they're running from comes back. And it's quite often you can see a lot of that reactive behaviour and all that kind of stuff, because they're not enjoying it. Yeah.
Yeah. And the whole story is that the whole answer is you can't run from yourself.
No, of course you can't.
But we all try.
Well, we can do, but I think sometimes if we stop running and actually look at the problem, it's probably not that bad, or it's not as bad as we're thinking it is. When we're running, it's just the fear, right? It's the fear of the fear. What are we actually scared of? Who knows? But I'm running from it anyway.
Yeah, that's right. Because I think I need to. Whereas if you perhaps sit with yourself for a bit and kind of go in, and you're like, hang on, things are okay. I've got this.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah. And that's often what people find. I think having a support group is important. It's hard to do it on your own. You've got to do it on your own, but it's hard to do it alone. People having support, things like going to AA or NA, like what Patty did, going along to one of those meetings and realising that you're not on your own. There's a bunch of people like me. Is really helpful. There's some really good solutions there, because at the very least you see there's a bunch of people that are living without alcohol or any other drug, and they've chosen to make a positive choice, and they seem to be surviving just fine. Yeah. Yes,
and that's the thing, and he's done it, and all credit to him. What he's like, without I'm using a rugby term there, but 6 months or something, he hasn't drunk. That's pretty amazing. That's incredible.
Yeah, I guess what he was experiencing initially was just that denial where everyone else knew what was going on, and he didn't want to know what it was. He even said that he didn't want to stop, he didn't want to look at it.
Yeah.
I think the first step of anyone's recovery is actually going, hey, I've got a problem. And once someone realises they've got a problem, then you're in a position to start doing something about it. If everyone else sees I've got a problem, but I don't see I've got a problem, I'm not going to do anything about it, am I?
No.
I'm just going to keep going.
No.
And it's my solution.
It's my solution to my problem. That's right. So I suppose people come to you, but maybe they don't really want to be there. How do you cope with that?
Well, I think that psychologist that was on there demonstrated a really good technique that's used in addiction, what they refer to as motivational interviewing, which is just asking the person, what do you want? When did you start drinking? What did you notice? All that kind of stuff. And then the person hears himself saying, actually, my first experience, what did he say, was a party when his mum was away and ended up vomiting in the backyard, and actually going, it was a terrible experience. So it's not me saying to someone, you're having a bad time. It's them hearing themselves talk about the reality of it. And you just sort of, I guess it's like what you're doing now, with journalism is that positive inquiry and letting the person explore what's going on for themselves. It's a good technique. because I think most people will defend their drinking. So me telling them to stop drinking isn't going to work.
No.
It's never going to work. And often that reinforces it, and the person will go home and have another drink. But asking them how they are they okay? What's happening? You know, the history of the drinking. When did it start? You know, when did it start getting out of control? Ask them what they noticed. That kind of stuff. That's where the gold is.
It's funny, you know, Heath, because like you're a musician, right? And you've been in lots of really cool bands with great people, and you were flying high. You're in the Puddle, and you played with Shane Carter and all sorts of, you know, Peter Gutteridge. These are, you know, big names. And
well, I never played with Shane or Peter. I knew Peter really well,
right?
But used to play around the same scene. For sure.
Yeah,
but the Puddle was great band. Yeah,
I was trying to find some songs.
A long time ago, though.
Yeah, I was trying to find. Have you got anything up on YouTube? Have you got any stuff online?
There's bound to be stuff up there, but it all seems so long ago for me now.
I can imagine. But yeah, I'd love to play. I'm going to try to find a couple of your songs today later in the show, and we'll play them. But I remember the Puddle.
Yeah, great band.
Yeah, good
George
fun.
is a great songwriter. Yeah.
Yeah, well, you know, and so do you still keep that up? The music?
Playing music? Not as much. I've had an injury in my wrist and stuff, but I still play in an old school sort of punk band, Infinite Justice. You probably, I don't know, you probably wouldn't want to play any of that on.
On the platform? I don't know. We're meant to be pushing boundaries on the station, so sounds cool.
Oh, well,
how fun would that be? Yeah, sorry.
Oh, no, sometimes you've got to push boundaries, right? But yeah, I haven't been playing. I don't play very much anymore, that's for sure. No. Yeah, not like the old days. In the 90s and stuff, it was, you know, travelling around and touring and making records and doing stuff. It was great, but it was a young person's game, and with me it came with that other stuff, you know.
Well, that was my question that I was about to lead into, was the fact that often music, drugs, alcohol, intrinsically linked. You know, I mean, look at the Beatles. Look at all the great stuff they did on acid. You know, I mean, and this is what I get from my son. He's like, well, you know, like he's pretty sensible, actually. I'm fortunate, but he did say to me, you know, when he was sort of, you know, 17, 18, well, okay, well, look at all these bands, Mum, because he's a musician, and he's like, look at the music they created, and it was all so good because they were high, you know, and and you do hear that a lot.
I'm not 100%. You do, but I'm not convinced by that, to be honest. I think a lot of bands experimented with stuff, but all the bands where it became problematic, it ended badly. And those bands you never really hear of, because when the drugs became a problem, you know what I mean? Things usually come to a crashing halt.
Kurt Cobain?
Well, that's right. Or, you know, or members get replaced, you know. That kind of happened with me, you know. I put myself in a position where no one could play with me because I was unreliable. Didn't know if I was going to play well or if I was going to pass out. Didn't know if I was going to turn up or would be argumentative or all kinds of stuff, you know. And the drugs end up becoming the new gig, you know.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and you wouldn't be alone there. There's so many people who've gone through that. And you're right, the only bands that survive are the ones that actually are clean, aren't they? Yeah.
Or it's where it's not a problem. It's not problematic, you know. And there are a lot of bands where the drugs have been problematic and stuff, and they've done really well, but they don't tend to be around very long.
Yes, yeah. It's a very short...
Or it ends badly.
Yeah, you're right. Yeah. Like there's this meteoric rise and this fantastic flash of blinding light, and you're riding high and everything's amazing, and then unfortunately it does end badly. You're right.
Yeah, well, it's like what Paddy was talking about. You know, for years you can be a functioning alcoholic or functioning addict, but it escalates. You get a tolerance to your drugs. You need to keep taking more to get the same effect, and it gets to the point where you can't function anymore. At some point, that's going to happen. If it keeps going on, something bad will happen. You know, it's inevitable. History has proven that. You know, it's once a drug becomes problematic, it's pretty hard to manage it.
Yeah. So how long can you see? I mean, you obviously give a lot. I think it's fantastic what you're doing, because it wouldn't be an easy job, and I imagine that the financial rewards aren't that great.
Well, I guess there's a big part of the recovery model, of the 12-step model, is the 12th step, which is once you're in a good place, with your own recovery, then extend the hand out to the next person. And a lot of people in recovery stick to that model. It's why you see a lot of people in addiction now that have the lived experience. It's because they're wanting to help others. And it can be quite a powerful thing, especially for someone who's asking for help and the person helping them has been in their shoes. It can be sometimes positive and less positive. You have to be aware of the difference of sympathy and empathy, but it can be a helpful thing. Yeah.
That's an interesting point you make about the difference between sympathy and empathy. No one wants your pity.
That's right, and it's dangerous. Yeah, for sure.
It's dangerous? Why?
Well, I think it's to have empathy for someone and to have that unconditional positive regard, that understanding of that they're going through something difficult is really helpful and it's needed. But to jump into that cold hole with them is not so good, the sympathy side of it. It can be kind of dangerous. There's a real difference between the two, yeah? Pity's never a good thing.
No, it's never good, is it? It's I feel so sorry for you,
Yeah.
And often
the message that goes with that is not very good, is it? It's like, why?
It's awful. Yeah, I feel so sad for you. You are such a mess. You're such a loser. So the person going through the pain and the addiction feels worse.
Well,
way worse.
It's almost inevitable. Yeah.
And probably sinks further down into that black hole.
Well, they can do. Yeah. It's definitely not going to help.
No. Okay, so it's all about empathy, but not in a sort of a cheesy, school teacher way. It's about really, really feeling where the person is at and providing positive things. This 12-step thing you talk about, that was what my cousin mentioned yesterday. He said to me, because I said, this is a really big ask, for you to actually come on the radio and talk to me live, about your experiences. And he said, when I like to share my story because that was the 12th step for him, was like reaching out to others. And he said, if I feel that I can help anyone, and he's not doing it in a you should listen to me or a really preachy way. He's not telling people how to live. And I think it was a positive experience for him and for me to hear his story, because even though he's my close relative and we see a lot of each other, I didn't realise quite everything that he'd been through. So it was quite a special interview, and obviously that 12-step program is super effective.
Yeah, well, it's peer-driven. There's no one telling anyone what to do. What's the motto of AA is, if you want to keep drinking, that's your business. If you want to stop, that's ours. It's as long as you're trying to stop, you're welcome.
Yeah, that's a good one.
As long as you've got a problem, you're welcome.
Yeah. Well, Heath, I think we might leave it there, and I've taken up a lot of your time, but it is great to be able to not have to, go to ads and just be able to talk at length about the big issues.
Especially the alcohol ads.
Yes, we don't have any ads at all, alcohol or otherwise.
Well done.
Actually, that would be a sad irony, wouldn't it, if we went to a Corona ad or something like that? It would be like, oh dear. Yeah, that's what would happen on other stations for sure. No, you're right. Yeah. You're dead right. But no, it's been really good to talk with you, Heath, and keep up the good work. And I'd love to check in with you at another time. And
absolutely.
Yeah, but I would like to try. I'm going to try to find a couple of songs from the Puddle. See if we can illuminate the audience.
Yeah.
It'll be fun.
Yeah. You may have a Cloudboy album around up there or something.
All right. Okay. Yeah, Cloudboy. Okay. Yeah, let's check it out.
Yeah. You never know.
Yeah, good. Well, we're quite new. We're only 6 or 7 weeks old, but we're, it's it's good to talk about this stuff. So I really appreciate your time.
Oh, right. Yeah.
Yeah. So have a good afternoon in Otipoti, and keep up the good work.
Yeah, you too.
All right. Cheers.
Good talking with you.
All right. Cheers.
Cool. Okay.
Heath Te Au.